Fire Emblem Heroes and Shadows are going to die someday. We all know that's true, but it feels weird to say, doesn't it? When Heroes came out back in early 2017, nobody expected that it would last all the way from the Wii U generation, through the Switch generation, into the start of the Switch 2, with no sign of slowing down. At this point, it's done so well that Intelligent Systems has been able to put out another Fire Emblem mobile game, just 2 weeks after the announcement of Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, and halfway through me writing a video about Fire Emblem Heroes. Anyway, on the subject of FE Heroes and Shadows dying someday, I wanted to talk about that today. I don't think it's happening anytime soon, but when that time inevitably does come, how might Nintendo handle sunsetting Fire Emblem's mobile games? I've got a few ideas for how it could be done, starting with...
Now to face Maker!
So this would suck, obviously. Heroes alone contains most of the content ever made for this IP, and not having an official way to access all of that art, voice work, and writing would genuinely be like a modern burning of the Library of Alexandria to weird gooners and loser lesbians everywhere. Maybe it's wishful thinking, but I don't think this is how Heroes is going to end up. This is both because of the amount of content they would just be throwing away, I mean, how many gacha games make it a decade? And because Veronica was in Fire Emblem Engage. That second part might feel silly to some people, but I think it would be weird for a mainline Fire Emblem game, which is one of the best-selling games in the series, to have a character from a game that just doesn't exist. Plus, they have music from Heroes in Smash Ultimate, so come on, please don't kill this game forever. Alternatively, I think FE Shadows is much more likely to meet this fate. There's always a chance that it gets so many updates that it becomes hard to imagine not being accessible, but with its gameplay taking place entirely online, what else could they even do?
Now to face Maker!
The idea of taking an old game's story and slapping it into a new game or collection isn't new. If you got into Kingdom Hearts in the last 10 years, you know exactly what I'm talking about. What if, so we don't lose everything, Fire Emblem's mobile games were converted into one big movie or asset library? I feel like this is very likely for Shadows in particular, considering its gameplay just wouldn't work in a single-player. If you have to get it out, please do it in the comments. I'm busy. I'm talking about something else right now. Anyway, Shadow's gameplay just wouldn't work in a single-player format. Plus, its story is entirely dialogue anyway so far. They could very easily tack this game's story onto, like, a future game. Imagine this. It's 2035. You boot up the Fire Emblem Fates HD triple pack, or something like that, on your Nintendo Switch 3, and see an extras tab at the bottom. In it, there's a music library, an art book section, and a tab that says Fire Emblem Shadows Theater Mode. Booting up this option presents you with all 15 chapters of Nintendo's recently canned mobile game. Now in 8K, or whatever, I don't know, you get what I'm saying. Personally, as much as I love Shadows so far and hope it lives forever, this seems like the best case scenario for the game. What about Fire Emblem Heroes, though? While it could get this treatment, I don't think a theater mode for the story is a good solution to an eventual end of service. Including every chapter, every Tempest trial, every paralogue, and a million other things feels impossibly large. And that's if we leave out a large chunk of the game's non-story content anyways. A theater mode that really honors all of the work put into the game would be a genuinely monumental task, and one that will only get harder every additional week the game is around. While this treatment would be better than nothing, I think there are a few better alternatives, such as...
Now to face Maker!
Converting a live service game into a premium, single-player one at the end of its lifespan is genuinely the best send-off possible. When another Nintendo mobile game, Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, stopped getting updates after 7 years, Nintendo handled it in a way that I think is almost perfect. You were able to transfer your save data from the original game to the offline version for 6 months, which, I'd hope so. All microtransactions were removed and their previous functions were replaced by free-to-play alternatives. And a few new features were added to make the game feel less lonely and simulate the now dead online mechanics. While it isn't perfect, of course, I would love for Fire Emblem Heroes to get this treatment. Yeah, it would suck to have to pay for a game I've already been playing for free since the Wii U era, but I'd do it to keep access to everything the game has to offer. Reworking banners to either automatically rotate in and out or just replacing them with something else entirely would be fine by me. What would we even lose without online? Summoner duels? Voting gauntlets? Everything else could be easily reworked into some sort of asynchronous multiplayer. Plus, that seems like a good trade-off to have all of the Fey Pass mechanics integrated into the game with a one-time payment. If Fire Emblem Heroes has to die someday, I think an offline version of the app would be a perfect solution. When it comes to FE Shadows, though, Unless the game has mountains of single-player content added onto it before end of service, which is possible, I don't see a traditional offline version being an option here. As it stands, the offline content for this game consists of, some cutscenes. They're good cutscenes, don't get me wrong, but it feels hard to justify a standalone offline app just for that. If Shadows is sunset before Heroes, though, which is honestly kind of what I expect, I think we could get a perfect combination of the last two options that I listed. What if Shadows' story was converted into a theater mode within an eventual Heroes offline app? That would make an upfront cost a little more bearable for me. I would also be totally shocked if we never got Shadows characters in Heroes, and so those characters being archived in this way in a game they're actually present in feels perfect to me. So at this point I've already talked about a few ways Nintendo could handle sunsetting its Fire Emblem mobile games, and how likely I think they are. I could end the video here, but I don't think the discussion is complete yet. Live service games don't always just die. Sometimes this process is stretched out into multiple phases over a long time, and other times they evolve into something entirely new. With that in mind, I want to talk about a couple more possibilities for the future of Heroes and Shadows, starting with...
Now to face Maker!
Did you guys know that Mario Kart Tour is still around? I got really into it a couple years ago, had my fun, and then moved on. Shortly after I dropped the game, though, Nintendo did something very interesting. They stopped updating it. Now, not updating a game isn't weird. If it were, this video wouldn't exist. But do you know what is weird? The game is still up. You can go play it right now, and if it were your first time picking it up, I don't think you would even realize the game was abandoned. This is because Nintendo is still cycling the game's old content and events. In fact, I just booted up the game for the first time since I dropped it, and it looked so alive. There was a tour I'd never seen starting, a daily login bonus, literally everything you'd expect. Obviously, we won't get to do this forever, and the game will be shut down someday, but I think this is a genuinely good way to stretch out its lifespan. We even got a small content update to celebrate the release of Mario Kart World just a few months ago. I think that all of that together sets a really fun precedent for how the FE mobile games could transition into one of the options I talked about before. Heroes has so many events to cycle through, I think it would take a new player years to realize we weren't actually getting anything new. With Shadows, it'll all depend how many season passes we end up getting and how many additional game modes they add before the game dies, but I could see that working for a while there too. In both cases, getting a little content update, like one new banner or pass for every mainline release, would also be a great way to keep those games relevant for newer players, with very little investment on Nintendo's end. What if they even, continued to run Choose Your Legends? Getting the player base to vote once a year for new characters, when all other new content has dried up, is a great way to keep investment. This maintained investment would even help keep players around for my very last idea for what Nintendo could do after killing FE's mobile apps. This idea being...
Now to face Maker!
Expanding on either of these games with a sequel would be so cool. At this point in time, it's hard to say what a Shadows sequel could look like, given that we've probably seen very little of what the game's eventual end product will be. Wouldn't it be cool to get these characters or this world in a mainline Fire Emblem game, though? I immediately fell in love with Shadow's presentation, and I'm so fascinated that the game for some reason uses Naga as its divine dragon, despite everything else going on with its setting being entirely new at this point. A Shadows sequel is also, again, a really good spot to throw a theater mode for the original game. If you want to kill me with hammers because I keep talking about theater modes, like the video and comment vague threats with no context. Anyway, I'm much more interested in talking about what a Heroes sequel could look like. It feels like a coin toss whether a sequel would be a real Fire Emblem game or another app. Talking first about the possibility of another app, the first question that needs answered is, how would they avoid pissing me off? The Fire Emblem Heroes I have at home works fine, so you'd have to do something very new to make a sequel worthwhile. On the flip side, though, if it's too different, I'm not going to be able to transfer any of the stuff from the previous game that I spent so much time and money on. An easy solution to this would be doing a sequel and going down one of the routes we talked about earlier. I couldn't really be mad if Heroes was still accessible somehow, but also wasn't getting new updates, so they could work on a new game. They could even turn Heroes into its own sequel, kind of like Overwatch. Hear me out, if they left the previous game mostly intact, and actually did add a sequel's worth of content over top of it, I think that would kick ass. Power creep would work as it always has, and so all my work in the game so far would still basically just be, pretty PNGs I collected. But that would be okay. We could reboot or revamp the central gameplay, making it maybe like a little more complicated than it currently is, so it doesn't just feel like I'm brute forcing through every map with the strongest units I've built. I would love for Aether Resort to be totally overhauled into like a focal point of the game with actual gameplay behind it. That would even make old PNGs useful outside of power creep combat. Holy shit, I'm a genius. That's cool. What was I talking about? Right, a Hero sequel. What if we got like a full Heroes console game? Doing what I described for Shadows would kick ass, and I don't really think I need to go over it again. Hear me out though. Live service Fire Emblem Warriors Heroes on Switch 2 or 3 or whatever. To me, that's like a match made in heaven. My only problems with the original Warriors were the lack of characters and the lack of content in comparison to Hyrule Warriors. What if we let Koei Tecmo try to recreate Heroes' money printing capabilities in a console entry? I know it's just wishful thinking, but I'm actually like salivating at the idea of Fire Emblem. But I'm actually salivating at the idea of a Fire Emblem Warriors game I never have to stop playing. And attaching it to the concept of Heroes feels like a perfect way to do that.
Now to face Maker!
So I talked a whole lot over the last little bit about what I would want to see when Fire Emblem Heroes and Shadows inevitably get 2% crit on Classic mode. If I had to say what I think is most likely though, I think Heroes is getting an offline version in like 10 years. And I think that in less than half that time, Shadows is getting put in theater mode prison.
I'm gonna fucking kill you, driving crooner!
Sorry. For the record, I don't think either of these games are dying anytime soon, and I'm not like wishing on their downfall here. I love this series. I even like Shadows, and I'm genuinely confused at the over-the-top negative reception it's received. I hope we keep getting random weird entries in this series forever. Hi, thanks for watching. I've been so blown away by the positive feedback I've gotten on this channel over the last month. Going from my first video to over 300 subs and 350,000 channel views less than a month later genuinely blew me away. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to talk about these series that I'm so passionate about. I hope you'll stick around to see what I have to say in the future, especially with a new Fire Emblem game on the horizon. Tell me when you think the mobile games are going to die down in the comments, and what you'd like to see IS do with them after that point. Okay, I love you, bye, I'm tired.